we're going to try this again. I at least kept the little vlog things for commentary, for fun, that when I feel bored, I can poke fun and maybe upload it. I was kind of doing, putting something on blast and talking shit. Noticed it was Saturn hour after the fact, and, oddly enough, it is Mercury Day, of course, but, I'm sure that this whole Sagittarius is, getting its last hurrah in, but, when I actually started getting into the important shit, the Saturnian shit, with defining the chart in the moment when Saturn went into Capricorn, it started to glitch when I was using my Manicam thing. So, fuck that shit. I'm getting really tired of this and I don't want to make this long. I don't have the patience for this. So I'm going to just insert the chart here, and I'm going to just dissect it. This is going to be really quick. Maybe, I always tell myself maybe I should do this, but I also get frustrated, and if I get frustrated, I can't think straight. But, I always think that maybe I should just piss myself off, or, you know, get really frustrated, and then just work on something, and then just delete it like 3 or 4 times in a row, because then I get so tired of it, after the 4th or 5th time I have to redo it, that it seems to get shorter, and shorter, and shorter, and shorter, but still seems to be just as informative. So, yeah, I'm going to do that. Let's go ahead and insert the chart, and let's dissect it here. Obviously, Saturn went into Capricorn as of last night, so December 19th, 2017 at 9:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The things that transpired yesterday was actually the Senate passed the Work and Jobs Bill, where it's the tax cut thing, where every working American will be getting essentially taxes back. They will increase the child tax credit, and it will be obviously cutting, you know, federal spending to an extent, which needs to happen because we are overdue for a Great Depression. Hence, when Uranus goes into Taurus, that is the sociological signature for the Great Depression, and so we need to do something about it. Hence, Trump is already well aware of that, and he's cutting the social services and he's cutting the extra expenses, hoping that he can save the country before it completely collapses. Because we can continue to pretend and to pander everybody and print fake money, but eventually that's all going to cave. Because remember too, he's trying to come back and create jobs, and he's trying to make America create its own supplies and resources and everything like that, right? So since we actually depend on foreign exports for everything that we need, and we are continuing to print money, basically slicing up and slivering the pie even smaller and smaller, we are getting less stuff, we are getting less quality stuff, and eventually we're not going to get any stuff. The IOU thing's not going to work for very long. So, something needs to happen. So he's trying to make us self-reliant again, and he's trying to cauterize the wound from any of the excess spending, which needs to happen. Do some history and some actual research. It is now Jupiter hour, by the way, if that doesn't say something. I'm being preachy. Insert chart. Alright, so since there's this huge fear-mongering thing that has been transpiring sociologically in the United States with the collective citizens because of the media and the Saturn-Neptune square, which again, since we're talking about Saturn, Saturn specifically with some of its transits, that does take precedence with this. It's fascinating. I was going to break down the present and then the future, and then potentially just look at the past just for lessons and this sort of thing, but we can actually go backwards with this because of the associations with the Saturn-Neptune square. So, specifically, when we're looking at this chart, you notice that because the first house is the present, and then the second house is the future, third house is the past. In the third house, at that moment, we actually do have Mars and Scorpio. So, Scorpio naturally is supposed to be defensive. or suspicious, and Mars is essentially the ancient ruler of Scorpio. So naturally defensive, and also Jupiter being in that house as well, that the people, or the perception of what is transpiring, and this obviously is supposed to be a Saturn transit thing, but Saturn in Capricorn represents conservatism, the Republican, the right wing, and everything that Trump and his cabinet represents, everything that is against the mainstream media and the ideology of socialism and communism that's been going on. So the ideology that is poisonous, the poisoned concepts, has made people naturally defensive. So their mentality overall before this moment is to be apprehensive and defensive. Then we go on and look at the 6th house. We have Juno, and then we have Hygeia there. And again, then we have the South Node, and specifically, the one key factor to highlight with that, because that's the past house, is that they're on Aquarius, which is a trauma signature. So there's some sort of trauma signatures specifically with them basically using the past kind of reputation that the Republican Party has, despite the fact that, Trump, if he could have actually won the Democratic nominee, he would have run for Democrat too. He doesn't care either way. He just needed to become president, and we all know that. Well, when I say we, I only mean like maybe me and maybe a handful of people, because Ceres and the North Node are actually in the 12th house of elusive secrets and things that are elusive to the collective in general. Ceres is supposed to represent how you heal yourself or how you resolve some issues, and collectively, since we're looking at this from a sociological chart, and the North Node has to do with direction, hence it's in the opposite chart, the opposite house of the 6th house, which is a trauma signature. People are actually unaware that this is their saving grace, and that's re-emphasized again when I was talking about the synchronicity with it being the overdue Great Depression. So when we're looking at Saturn specifically, it's you can take it or leave it. It's within 1 degree of a conjunction with Black Moon Lilith, but that's also in the 5th house. So let's go ahead and just dissect the 4th house here. The 4th house is where Saturn is at. 4th house on a sociological or a mundane level represents the foundation or the homeland, specifically like the country in general. So it's going to be some sort of overall conservatism, specifically on a microcosmic level of the home, an individual home, like person by person, or just collectively. So when we're talking about collectively, that would be on a national federal level. There's going to be some sort of conservatism or rationing on a federal level. Necessary. It's absolutely necessary at this point, because we're going to have some sort of economic downturn regardless, in some way, shape, or form. There will eventually be a bubble of some kind, and I think just because of how much in the red we were, and then on top of that we added Obamacare to that, I really don't think that, despite Trump's very valuable efforts, that he'll actually be able to save everything from the debt that has accrued because of Obamacare. I just don't really think that that's going to be something that's plausible. But one thing is for sure, the polarity reciprocated with this, the 4th house, it's obviously going to, on a public level, make it evident that this is a conservative or a right wing, or just not anything but socialist country is going to be the epitome of this. And when we look at the 11th house, we have Hades in there. So Hades, actually, when we reference the USA's chart, Hades is also in the 11th house. So the actual chart of the moment. So the same kind of, so that's just re-emphasizing the same kind of synchronistic signatures that Trump is basically gutting everything and putting everything back to the founding fathers' original blueprints and what they were intending to do. And let's see. So for the present moment, we don't have really anything per se going on in the 1st house, and then the 4th house obviously has that Saturn there and the Sun, and so this is going to be this day, and that reemphasizes the whole tax bill that was passed. This day is going to have some sort of major impact overall with the conservatism or basically causing some sort of intense upheaval that's going to be impacting not just people on an economic level, but on a communication level as well. Because people are going to essentially, again, be dealing with the cognitive dissonance, and also, I can't imagine that there's not going to be some sort of revolt against the media to some extent. And that kind of is reinforced with Black Moon Lilith being in the 5th house itself, with Pluto and the Moon there as well. So we have Pluto and the Moon conjunct also in Capricorn. So at this moment when Saturn went into Capricorn, although the Moon ingresses every 2.5 days, this moment is supposed to be the residual signature that will be the overall theme for the next 3 years. So the fact that the Moon, so the attitude and mentality, the psyche, or the transformative kind of roles, and the Black Moon as well, and Saturn, which is essentially a generational signature again, and the Sun's actually not in Capricorn yet, so it's going to, so that actually, I kind of overlooked that. That's a interesting factor actually. Yeah, that's actually just reinforcing the cognitive dissonance thing. Because Sagittarius is all about, like, abundance, giving too much, expansive, exaggerated. And the stuff was going to be exaggerated, more or less. Or people, in general, are going to be having some very intense mental dysphoria, cognitive dissonance, neurosis, because what's happening and the benefits that will result in this actually transpiring is going to go completely against everything that they know. So that's the perfect recipe for cognitive dissonance, which has already been a thing since Neptune and Jupiter were in opposition when Jupiter was in Virgo. So since Scorpio is now the ruler of Jupiter, that is 2 signs ago. So that was 2 years ago. So people have been losing their shit for 2.5 years, hence the mutable years. That's just kind of reinforced. So then we look at the other present house, which is the 7th house. That is the repercussions, or the result, or the symptoms that will arise because of the transit's theme. So Neptune's known for not knowing what the fuck is going on, right? Hence the North Node and the Ceres aspect that's supposed to be healing or for the greater good in the 12th house, the Neptune house. They're completely oblivious. And Chiron's also in that house as well. So not only are people completely oblivious that this is actually for their own good, but they're actually completely oblivious that they're actually going to have complete psychotic shit fits because they can't comprehend and can't process what's actually going on. So other than that, we have the Earth midpoint symbol, obviously in opposition with Saturn in the 10th house, and it's in Gemini. So Gemini would be emphasizing that there's going to be a divide or split, likely with the country as a whole, or what is intended to be the country, and what the government is doing. And then again, with Hades in the 11th house, Hades is an extension of Saturn, or, is more of a fusion, I guess, if you were going to think symbology-wise, between Saturn and Pluto. So it would be purging, or taking things away, transforming them. Taking things away and transforming them, I think definitely reiterates all the budget cuts that have been happening. And again, it's for the greater good, for people to conserve and stop wasting so much resources. And that's the thing. So one of my friends just happened to say and I already had mentioned this beforehand, but I scrapped that video. I have the footage, but I'm not even going to bother. That pretty much this tax cut thing completely fucks over all of California. Well, then California should secede already, like it's been threatening to do so. For all we know, Trump actually probably legitimately took their threats seriously and didn't really think twice about it, or with the way that they've been treating him, and that Hollywood is essentially the home of, or the hornet's nest, more or less, that has been completely enabling the media, like Kathy, what is her name, Kathy Griffith? Is that who that is, Boo?
Is that the psycho bitch with the severed head thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Obviously, even if it wasn't filmed there, that's like the home base, right? So, the hornet's nest, like, you need to get rid of the pests and stuff. Like, how could he have any fucking sympathy for that? And again, it's actually karma in general, too, because the only reason why California became a state, and the only reason why California became what it was today, is because essentially the Civil War was started because of California. Because California became a state, and essentially the Republicans decided that if you're going to continue to have slaves, the South, by the way, if you're going to continue to have slaves, Democratic South, because you have agriculture and we have the Industrial Revolution up here and we don't actually need the slaves anymore, so we're going to take the moral high ground and pretend like we're better than having slaves, but it's actually because we just didn't need them because they're not economically plausible. That's the actual real reason. Let's not sugarcoat it. I'm not going to take sides. That is the legitimate reason why. Just because you don't have to do anything more and it's not beneficial to you doesn't mean you take the moral high ground and say you're better than everybody else that doesn't do it anymore. But, here's the thing. They basically said, well, we're going to actually tax all of you Democrats, which is really funny, ironically, because it's totally topsy-turvy now, right? Which is, yeah. Anyway, we're going to tax you an extra something percentage for every single slave that you bring to California if you migrate to California. The Democrats took that as the Republicans were trying to basically put a cock block on them so they couldn't come to California and take advantage of all the gold that people were just finding. Because you basically just show up and you just go, mine, this is this chunk of land is mine. And whatever you dig in the bottom and you find is yours. They were saying, like, well, I have to give up my slaves, and I can't give up my slaves, and I can't afford this, and whatever like that. And I'm not even promised for sure if I'm going to find gold when I get over there, so even if I, fork out the money to bring all my slaves and all my property, then what is that to say that I'm actually going to, benefit from any of this? That was the original thing. So I think it's actually really ironic and funny that we are in the synchronistic time frame, overdue for a civil war, overdue for an economic depression, and the remedy for the economic depression that happened, the Great Depression, was to create the social service safety net that has now obviously been completely abused and used, and basically all the resources are being spread too thin, which is exactly why all this conservatism signatures need to manifest. And for all those people, I have to say, and I'm going to, obviously, Jupiter hour, so let's take it as you will. I'm going to be really dogmatic and preachy. For all those people, specifically like an individual that's on my Facebook wall, that said, I think you owe Trump an apology, and you need to admit that you were misinformed, and that he's actually trying to benefit you. He tried to say that this is actually not good, that they're taking the taxes. I already had that argument with people, that they can go ahead and donate their extra money they get back right back to the IRS. Yeah. I'll actually go find the link again if people actually want it. So if it's such a huge fucking deal, if every Democrat or every person who votes Democrat or thinks that this budget cut is bad and doesn't think that they actually need this money, but that's really funny because half of them actually bitch that they don't have enough money, or their kids are the ones that are basically, hoboing it in tents on Wall Street and bitching that they don't have any money or a job. Are you guys really going to get the money back? You sure fucking aren't. You sure fucking aren't. You aren't. I guarantee you aren't. I would actually bet money down. Nobody's going to give it back. You're all bitching that this is going to be bad, but you're not going to give it back. So if anybody tries to come back and say, well, this isn't good for us, then I'm like, then go ahead and put up or shut up and go donate back every single penny that you get. Go ahead. They welcome that. So it says gift to the federal IRS. Yeah, it's on the WhiteHouse.gov website. But anyway, so when we're looking at this here, the USA's chart has a Sagittarius rising. So Pluto is obviously already in Capricorn for the USA's founding, and again, we're already going through our Pluto return here. The second house has to do with financial resources and stability in general, and so there's going to be a crunch of resources in general. The resources of the federal government as a whole is going to be cut down, which is exactly what's going on. So the reciprocating factor of that would be if you were going to pretend that the top of the chart is the individual as opposed to the bottom, because we're looking at this from a sociological perspective, the reciprocating factor that would happen from being conservative, strict, and responsible with the second house, which vicariously would be the 8th house in a mirror kind of, example, would be that the self is going to benefit from the resources that will happen. And fancy enough, in the USA's chart, we have Uranus in the 6th house of work and service, and that's a trauma signature or a dysfunctional signature, right? So something along the lines of Pluto actually being in the 2nd house of resources and finances in general would directly have some sort of issues with the stability or the function of the work and service, or in general just the mundane just obligations in general of the country as a whole. So fancy that when we actually do have Uranus go into Taurus. Taurus is the ruler of the 6th house. We are going to, in retrospect, be having Wonderland, or the polarizing effect of what originally was in the USA's founding chart back in 1776. So he's basically going to be he's going to right all of the potential dysfunctions that were happening with the country in general. So in general, the first initial day of Saturn in Capricorn is a perfect example of the next 3 years theme, and I have a feeling it'll be a continuation of that. And just I'm not going to emphasize on any other major generational aspects per se, because that'll be something I'll address at a later date. Specifically, when Uranus goes into Taurus, that'll be something else to discuss as well. And all I have to say is, when we're looking at the future houses, which is the 2nd, the 5th, the 8th, and the 11th, there's nothing in the 2nd house. Then in the 5th house, Pluto's there, the moon. Pluto is associated with power and control. The moon is the collective attitude of the people, or the collective citizens of the United States. And the 8th house is essentially the reciprocation of the resources, or the collective country's resources. Having Uranus conjunct with Eris and Pallas right there means that there's going to be some sort of basically martyr, revolutionary person, which is specifically Trump in this case, that basically turns the tables with the financial power that has been a huge continuing issue. And the result of that is actually going to be some sort of substantial elimination of the unnecessary, exaggerated social services that don't need to happen. Like, for example, just putting other people on blast. There's 2 people who live in this house who are almost the same age as me and my boyfriend here. My brother and his girlfriend. They both are on food stamps, even though they live at this house. They don't actually technically need them. And if they actually just worked and went out and got a job, and were responsible and Saturnian, then they actually could handle it. Or if we just shop smart and they, were rationing and being responsible, we could potentially make it work. But because they have the capacity to get those vouchers, they do. And that's exactly what's been happening, and that's exactly what Trump's been cutting. So all the people who say that this is a huge deal, actually, the whole point of pulling the rug out from underneath somebody is so they catch themselves. The safety net thing was a good intention by Roosevelt, and I could see where it had its purpose. But I already can think of people, and I'm not going to start name dropping everybody, but I can already think of 4 or 5 people off the top of my head right at this moment that I know personally that are thoroughly and continually abusing the system and bleeding the finances dry. So, does that. Saturn's a bitch. Saturn's not fair. Saturn is natural law. Saturn is the judge. It's karma. if you're going to sit there and play around and act like a Sagittarius and be all childish and fucking, stretch yourself thin and think that you can just continue to print money and that there will be more pies after pies after pies, when there's no fucking things to make one, that won't happen. And you should be thankful that Trump's actually coming in and doing this the way he is, because this is going to happen one way or another. You're going to have it pulled out from underneath you one way or another. And at least Trump is trying to do this now in hopes that he can just, basically swap and put the resources somewhere else in order to potentially, motivate things to thrive before it completely collapses. So there's that. Yeah, that's generally the Saturn Capricorn thing. I'll go into Black Moon, Lilith, and Capricorn still throughout the houses. I already did the archetype, behavioral things, and I'm sure there's other things to come. So it's gonna be the new year soon. I'll be doing a 2018 chart as well. So yeah, until then, hasta.